the final act, in a sense, of this year's summit. We began with Vishakha Gandhi, Minister for Women and Child Development. We're going to end up with another prominent face of the Narendra Modi government, a woman who I have enormous admiration for, because as a television anchor where a spokesperson is often judged by the level of their decibels, Nirmala Sitharaman is very unusual because she's able to persuade you without raising her voice. And for that alone, she deserves a huge applause. Because I remember in the days that she was party spokesperson between 2010 and 2014, at least from me, she was my first choice. I said, for the only reason that when the other person doesn't speak too loudly, then you also tend to keep your voice down. But she's much more than been just the party spokesperson. She's, again, a woman of many parts. Did her PhD in Indo-European textile, ma'am, correct me if I'm wrong, at JNU. So she's a PhD. She was a senior associate at Price. Okay, she hasn't attended a Viva, so the PhD is not complete. You can do that, ma'am, after 2020 or 2019. If ever you have to leave the cabinet, you can always go back and do your Viva. But that apart, she was a senior associate at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So she's seen the corporate world at very close hand. And that perhaps makes her eminently suited to her present role as Minister for Commerce and Industry and a key player in the Prime Minister's Make in India pitch. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nirmala Sitharaman. The topic, ma'am, is pitched as the future is here, and it is female, independent, and educated. Are you convinced that the future is female, independent, and educated? Because you're in a field where, let's be honest, right at the very top, number of women in powerful positions still less than 10%. So is the future really female, independent, or educated, or is this something that we would like to aspire towards?
Yeah, the latter. I think that's something which we like to aspire towards. It takes a lot of effort. It's not going to be easy. And even then, even at the cost of sounding a bit not in league with many women activists, I would say, it need not go to the extreme of, oh, the future is here, it's all going to be women. I would want it to be fair to women and not at the cost of denying men. Never. I think we equally respect men and their achievements, but we women want it for what we are. And it's not at the exclusion of men.
That's interesting. That because you at a cabinet meeting, you must be surrounded by, it's dominated by men. How difficult is it for you to get your voice in edgeways? How difficult is it? Are you hesitant at a cabinet meeting? Do the men, you can tell this audience, are there men in that cabinet meeting who look at you and say, make you uncomfortable?
Actually, first thing, we are quite a few women in the cabinet.
Not enough.
And very vocal women. So,
who's the most vocal woman in the Indian cabinet? Is it you? Is it Uma Bharti? Is it Vishakha Gandhi?
No, I think all of us speak out a lot.
Smriti Irani?
All of us speak out a lot. I will say this. All of us speak out a lot. And I don't think there's any one man who's told us, oh, no, you wouldn't do it. No. No one has done that to us.
You know, the reason I started off with this is because even with Maneka Gandhi, I raised this question, ma'am. What will it take to have more women in public life? You know, she made the argument that women often are their own worst enemies, and she gave the example of panchayat women who have who've often allowed the men to take over their lives. You're an interesting case. I don't know how many in this audience know that your husband is also a politician, and you actually belong to different parties. I mean, I've often wondered at the dining table, if husband and wife belong to different political parties, how do you survive?
We focus on food.
But you know, where it came from is that people, you're an interesting case study because you haven't come from a political family in a sense that even a Menaka has. How difficult was it for you to establish yourself and that journey from PricewaterhouseCoopers to BBC World Service to then becoming a politician? Was there resistance? Is it easier for someone who has a husband or a father or a brother in politics?
To be fair, yeah, you're right. I've come from a family which has nothing to do with politics, but married into a family which is all full of politics, belonging to a party which is not mine. And every member of the household has been active in politics and continue to be active in politics. And since after my marriage, I have not been actively engaged. Of course, we were abroad, we came back, and I had no intention of being in politics at that time, but I had kept watching them, being very closely, you know, being a member of the family and also watching them for whatever they are doing in public service. And when it came to me coming over to the National Commission for Women, and subsequently when the party decided to invite me to be a part of the National Executive, I must say it is my in-laws who were the first one to say, yes, take it up. And BJP was the party where they were fighting against, but no hesitation.
That's right, because if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm not mistaken, your husband's family was a Congress family.
It continues to be a Congress family, except for my husband, of course, no longer in Congress.
So it must get even more difficult when it was your mother-in-law, father-in-law, husband, and you on the table. I mean, the food must have had to go on for hours for you all to sort of ensure that there were no fights on the table.
Absolutely, and here, quite contrasting with the opinion that for very many women are their worst enemies. I don't vouch for that at all. My personal experience has been my own people, women in the family in particular, have been the greatest of strengths. Starts with my mother-in-law. She is of immense strength, even today. Even today, she is one of the biggest motivator for me. And she stood by me for everything that I've done.
So it's interesting. To have a strong, independent woman, you need a strong mother-in-law. You need a supportive mother-in-law, particularly in the Indian context. The difference between a PricewaterhouseCoopers, which was, and the BJP must be very different, or any political party. What was the biggest change that you had to make that transition from being a corporate executive to becoming a full-time politician?
Well, I'm not sure if I had to change a lot, but I did carry the strengths to my party. And the roles that I have been given in the party have all been of such nature that I could bring in those strengths and effectively use them. So in a way, it wasn't for me to change from a corporate mindset to what I have to do in a political party. And more so, when I moved over to managing the election campaign, the media side of it in Gujarat, or later with Vasundhara Raje in Rajasthan, the clockwork precision with which I had to work with them to meet with their expectations could all be served because I was carrying those experiences of my corporate world with me. And therefore, I think today, and in fact, it's not just me, a lot of people with corporate world as their background are moving over to come and manage even panchayats. I can recall the name of Chavi Rajvi.
Yes, Chavi Rajawat.
Rajawat, sorry. She's gone back to manage a panchayat in Rajasthan. There are quite a few women like that who are now foregoing their corporate world and their jobs in the corporate world and coming to do real-time politics at the panchayat level or any other chosen level. So I think today it is coming of great help, particularly for women who are coming in at a lateral level.
That's interesting because in a sense you believe therefore that management principles can be applied to contemporary politics.
Absolutely. And that makes a lot of difference in the kind of delivery that you are going to do to the audience, the voter, to the people being governed and so on.
I mean that's explained the difference between you and Uma Bharti. So I won't go down much further down that road because Uma Bharti is as different to you that you could get. But politics and public life, as I said, do you believe that who's going to drive change for women? You were part of the National Commission for Women. And many believe that these bodies at the end of the day are talking shops. I mean, is there too much of talk about gender justice in this country and not enough action even today, you believe?
Without personalizing, however, based on my personal experience in the National Commission for Women, these bodies need not be talking shops. Actually, if you understand the role that you're expected to play, and if you really do have a picture of what you would want to deliver, in each one of the cases which approach you, you can make a very big difference. And I'm not just lecturing here on it. I can quote instances where, because you believed in it and you wanted to do it and you took the officials with you on board, we could make a difference. There are clear instances.
Give me an example, ma'am.
For instance, women in the film world, particularly those dealing with technical jobs, whether they were doing the makeup or they were holding cameras or they were doing other things, editing or whatever, were not treated equally with men. They were not even given membership in their associations, in their respective associations. And it was a catch-22 situation. If you weren't a member, you wouldn't get your full-time salary. And you can't be a member because you're a woman. We, in fact, from the National Commission, in fact, I was discouraged from taking this up. They said, oh my God, particularly you're going to the South, where most of the states in the South do have top bosses of the film world, being either chief ministers or, holding very big position. Please don't take it up. But I did go through it in a very methodical fashion, had proper panel of, people who could adjudicate on this matter, and NCW has a quasi-judicial function, and we ensured at the end of a 2-day full-time hearing and the kind of pressures which came on us, we didn't yield. End of the day, we did ensure that women got the right. We publicized it in the papers and went to the extent of saying if they were still going to be denied, the Commission would take very severe action. And mind you, with a bit of delay, all women did get it. Entire class of women who were till then doing only a subcontracted job, a male member would get it, he would get the full payment, but the female member would just be a, under him kind of a thing, and she would get half the payment. Were all given the membership, and post that, they were entitled to everything that men got. So it was possible. It was like a class action. Everybody.
So you're saying today, therefore, in the film industry, it's an interesting example you've given.
Yes.
In the film industry today, there are women artists, in a sense, or those who are working in and around the film industry now finally have the same rights as men.
They should, and if they are denied, it will be a very serious offense.
So therefore, it's now an offense under the law.
Yes, absolutely. It was an offense even before, but we ensured that we brought it to their notice, saying you're violating the law, you should be implementing it, and post that sitting that we've had with a very large empowered panel, it was implemented by the film industry.
I'm just wondering, therefore, that's an interesting example, just to ask you whether it is legislation that is going to bring in change or implementation or mindsets. I mean, we have a lot of strong gender laws which would promote gender justice, but implementing them is the big challenge. Do you believe that the real crisis is that, the failure to implement those laws? Did it require, for example, a Nirbhaya case for us to sort of get a stronger law when it came to rape? We have the Vishakha Guidelines when it comes to sexual harassment at the workplace. But is implementation the challenge even today because male mindsets have not changed?
And you were right in saying one more thing earlier. It's the implementation, it's also the mindset. Vishakha Guidelines, much before that act got passed in the parliament, Vishakha Guidelines, as spelled out by the Supreme Court, was the law of the land. It required every institution where women come and go, even if they are not employed there, but wherever women are interacting with an institution, that there should be a committee to take care of any harassment that may take place at a workplace. Many of them don't have the complaints committee. They did not have it then, and we did follow it up. Today the situation may be a bit improved, but even today I can safely say many organizations still do not have the complaints committee. So where do harassed women go, even to give a fair complaint? And the constitution of this complaint committee, it was also very clearly spelled out by the Supreme Court. It should have an NGO member, it should have a, so-and-so, it should have 5 members, it should have a woman head. I'm not sure very many of them even follow it.
The reason I'm raising the mindsets issue is you've got, again I raised it with Menka Gandhi as well, you've got a minister, a culture minister, ma'am, who's quoted as saying women should not go out at night. And I'm just wondering, you have other ministers who at various stages say, women should not be seen in short dresses. How do you conquer those mindsets? What do you have to say about your culture minister? There must be a culture clash between you and him.
I have nothing to say about my culture minister.
You're playing safe. But is there that? You've seen the kind of statements that Mulayam Singh Yadav has made. When it's come to rape, he's saying, "Bacche hai, nadan hai." And I just wonder, ma'am, that if your leaders don't change their mindsets, how do you expect the people out there, their followers, to change their... Or do you believe there's a north-south divide? That you come from Tamil Nadu, you're married into a family in Andhra, life is better down south than it is here north, up north?
I like to believe that. I like the situation to improve even in the south. Of course, all over the country, there should definitely be a fresh look at how we handle matters related to women. It's not just when rape flares up. It's not just when, we find that dropouts in school, more girls are dropping out and so on. We don't need to wait for a crisis-like situation to say, oh my God, how are we treating our women? Every day, I think every family should apply their mind saying, what are we doing to our girls? And
but the men need to change, ma'am. I've often wondered, I thought the Prime Minister got it right last year at Independence Day, where he said, men, please start teaching your men how to respect women rather than the focus on women. I mean, I would like this summit, frankly, to have more men.
No.
How are we going to change how are we going to change male mindsets?
Well, I thought the Prime Minister didn't say men should change their mindset on this. He said,
boys.
Look at the way we treat our boys. Look at how we talk to our girls in the household, saying, where are you going? When will you come back? Are you going to be late? Would you ask these very same questions to your sons? That's exactly what the Prime Minister said, and I think he was right in saying that we should have expectations of our daughters and sons similarly. Why should we have a different set of expectations for our daughters and fairly relaxed ones for our sons? I think both will have to have a sense of responsibility and also a certain kind of value system with which we respect each other. That's not inculcated to our boys at home. That's got to be highlighted.
You're a mother of
only child, girl.
Your only child, a girl.
Glad.
And that's terrific. I've seen a lot of politicians who have that. Sharad Pawar. We criticize Sharad Pawar for various things. I won't go into those lists of his other deals. But I've always admired the fact that he had only one child who was a daughter, and he brought in law in Maharashtra to try and ensure that there was true gender justice. So not all politicians are as terrible as they appear. But the question is, ma'am, you yourself have supported, run a school for girl children, for the girl child in Andhra Pradesh. Is education at the end of the day the key? All of this. I mean, how are you going to empower the young women in rural India who do not have access to perhaps any notion of privilege unless you provide them quality education? Is that the basic challenge?
Well, the school I ran was a mixed school. It wasn't specific for girls, and I believe mixed schools do help. Education is important, but education not just the school kind. Education everywhere. Evenings out when you're sitting together with your friends and families, whether within the family, all that is part of the education that you impart to your youngsters. And somewhere I think education is also when your practices, your conduct is emulatable. If you as adults behave in a certain fashion to your men, or your men behave in a certain fashion to your women, obviously your youngsters are going to get carried away by that. So I think best way of education is by setting your behavior, your conduct in such a way that naturally that gets imbibed in your youngsters. If your practices are different and they themselves require a bit of a correction, you can't confine education to just schools.
Are you seeing the change in the air? Are you seeing more and more women breaking down doors, challenging the system, being far more questioning? Do you believe there is this change? It may not be always noticeable, but there is the change. I give an example of the Foghat sisters in Haryana, a family of women wrestlers in a state with the worst gender ratio in this country. Do you see more and more women now coming out, breaking stereotypes, or is it all too slow even today?
Yes, you see more and more women coming and trying out newer areas of work or professions that they choose to be in. But the more you see, the more you also see stereotypes. And I'm worried about that. The stereotypes, the reinforcing of these stereotypes through, public programs. And also, I think the language used in public discourse is also skewed against women. Every word that is uttered, sometimes, if you really sit up and watch, can be hurting. So, as much as you see women fighting to come and, try newer areas to prove themselves, you also see enough of reinforcement of stereotype, which I think consciously should be avoided.
Are you someone who therefore believes these Fair and Lovely ads or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Disgusting.
You want to get rid of Fair and Lovely ads? Why don't you sit at the cabinet meeting and put up?
Did you notice something? Fair and Lovely ads nowadays are bringing I'm not talking of a particular company, but then there are now men also be fair kind of a thing. It's all right now, gender equality. Women, not just women are trying to be fair, men are also trying to be, oh God.
But advertising needs to also change. As you said, stereotypes, are they perpetuated through advertising, through popular culture?
100%.
Even today?
Yes. As much as you have newer, questioning and nicely challenging advertisements, you still have a good layer of, the stereotypes. Once you raise your voice, maybe they retract, but they're still there.
Okay, before I open this to the audience, I want to ask you one question. As Commerce and Industry Minister, you must often meet corporate India. You sit in a CII meeting and a FICCI meeting. You must be surrounded by all these men in their dark suits and ties. Would you like to see corporate India also wake up and restore a greater element of gender balance? Are there too many men in suits when you are in these boardrooms talking to corporate India?
Yes, no doubt. And I also must concede, even the public sector undertakings which are there in my ministry, to get a woman director is such an effort. There are a lot of qualified women. There are a lot of women who are definitely stuffed for being in a board, but they do not want it. Or they think they'll be taking too much in their hands, which is very well. But there aren't enough. So I keep going around searching from a limited pool of people, and I wish there are more women who are willing to take that responsibility, because we need to have more women in the boards. It's becoming definitely, why becoming? It's always been, I think, a male club. We need more women presence.
So, no, I'm just wondering whether I can put a headline point. Nirmala Sitharaman says CII and FICCI are male clubs. Right? Why not? Say it. They are, aren't they?
Why CIN tricky? Even many companies' boards can be, you know. I'm not trying to. I'm not here to make a headline.
Just saying, is corporate India a male club?
I'm not giving Rajdeep the advantage of a headline, but certainly we need more women everywhere. And in fact, why Rajdeep doing the interview today? There should have been a woman here.
But that's terrible. No, that's terrible. I'll tell you one thing. The one profession where there is a relative gender balance is actually the television newsroom. Frankly, in television newsrooms, and women make far better reporters and anchors than men. I'll even concede that. But the fact is that we have lots of women, ma'am, in the newsroom, much more than politics has. And we haven't even thrown up a cabinet secretary who's been a woman. 67 years into independence, you've had women prime ministers, but you haven't had a woman bureaucrat. So actually, journalists are better, ma'am. We are terrible in most ways, but our gender balance is not so bad. And
maybe so. I have no question about it. But today, since you're driving everything from the point of view of a woman here, woman there, woman here, woman here too.
No, but that's I'm going to have a small final word and then we'll open it. Is that to my mind is also a stereotype. That is creating what I call the Zanana culture.
That's a journalist speak.
That's
a journalist speak.
Ma'am, that's a Zanana culture, that women will interview women, that women will do soft subjects like health and education. When I entered journalism, that's how it was. If you were a woman, and I'm sure Raj will concede, if you were a woman reporter, you were put into health, education, environment, so-called soft subjects. Women were not supposed to even cover politics. That's changing. And therefore,
I don't know if that is changing, but I can tell you it has changed in the government. External affairs woman, commerce and industry woman, and therefore education woman, and therefore we are changing.
Okay.
I'm not going to say whether media is changing, journalists are changing or anything, but since we are talking, I'm quite, in fact, starting the whole, this discussion, I was okay with Rajdeep. But the more it's going with woman, I thought, why not here have a woman? That's all that.
Prime Minister man. Prime Minister man.
You've had a Mrs. Indira Gandhi earlier.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Nirmala Sitharaman, let's open up questions and give her a big hand. Okay, let me get the women to ask you questions, since you are having a problem with men asking you questions.
Not at all. I'm quite okay with men asking me questions.
Wonderful. Yes, ma'am. You just need to have a mic in your hand. Yes, sir. I don't think it is.
Sorry. Madam Minister, since you have talked about stereotyped men, would you say morality is simply an attitude of men towards women, wives, and daughters?
Well, I wouldn't attribute it to just men. Women and men together do have a contribution in defining morality. So why should you blame just the men?
No, I'm just talking about the attitude of men.
Sorry?
She's talking about the attitudes of men.
Attitude of men.
Do you blame the attitudes of men for, in a sense?
No, it equally applies to man and woman.
Let me get a couple. Yes, ma'am, here.
Hello. Madam, I am coming from Kolkata. I am Dr. Manabi Bandopadhyay. I am a principal of a women's college. I have a question. I am coming from Kolkata, West Bengal. I want to know the thinking of central government about transgender and Hidra's verdict of Supreme Court, because I am also a trans woman. First time I was a transgender, now I am a trans woman before my surgery. Now so I want to know that what is the thinking of central government about us?
Well, I'll narrow it down to the bill which got passed in the Rajya Sabha by honorable member, introduced by member Thiruchi Shiva, post which that bill will either be taken up by the government as a bill from its side, or the government will have to come up with a bill which is comparable to it. And the government is seriously looking into either taking Shiva's own bill or seeing if it can present. In other words, we are actively looking at getting that bill in the Lok Sabha too.
And that
says everything about.
And that bill provides equal rights, in a sense, to transgenders.
Yeah, you know the contents of it as it got passed in Rajya Sabha. So obviously, we are open-minded about taking that into the Lok Sabha.
Okay. Two quick last questions. Yes, ma'am.
Recently in, I think it was in Istanbul, Ms. Christine Lagarde said that, you know, if the gender parity in India was increased, our GDP would increase by about, I think she said 27%, given the kind of ministry that you're in. What do you think?
Who had said this?
Christine Lagarde. Do you think there is a lot that can be done in the workspace to make gender parity a much, not just the Vishakha guidelines, but just the way businesses are modeled, the way business models work, to increasingly look at ways at integrating the peculiar and the specific capacities that women bring to workplace?
Capacities and also work needs. Absolutely. Yes, there should be almost a fresh look at way in which work is designed. Work requirements are designed. And if the profile of the work so allows man or woman to work, it shouldn't be tailored to fit the needs of a man alone. And therefore, I think in the workspace, there has to be a fresh relook at the way in which we are using our workforce, considering that in India, women constitute much lesser than the men in terms of total workforce. I think they should be given a fresh look at it.
Anything specific, ma'am, that that you believe needs to be done in that regard? Maneka Gandhi this morning, for example, has been pushing this idea of 8 months maternity leave, and this audience was overwhelmingly supportive of that. Would you support that? Do you believe something innovative, something new needs to be done to give the woman that confidence or at the workplace?
Many more, and I wouldn't restrict it just to maternity-related matters. I would relate it even to the work women can do, the potential. Maternity and maternity-related matters are just incidental for me. The capacity of a woman has to be utilized for what it is. It need not just be. That starts from the way in which you start looking at, you report to work at 9 sharp. It need not be so. You're giving work flexibility to men. You work from home, you do your this, you do your that. Similarly, the way in which reporting to work itself is looked at, and also number of hours of work. Women tend to do a lot more intensive work. Women multitask. And I'm not getting into a jaded argument of, oh, we multitask. And you can try it out. I see in many of the workspaces, women take more than one responsibility at a time. By nature, they do that. Women are also specifically good at some tasks which most men do not want to do. So why wouldn't such things be taken as a USP of the woman and the work be designed to help her to perform on those grounds? So I'm just restricting it to a few things which I can take in favor of designing for women. But I suppose it can be designed for woman and man to optimize on each one of their strengths. Just to, be a back page or a front page of some norm which has been established for, let us say, man or let us say woman, need not restrict the potential of a work capacity of any employee. For instance, I would even take this extreme example. Why are only women nurses? Male nurses can also perform equally. But if you think nursing as a job, you tend to think only women. I find that also restrictive because they tend to saturate and it becomes a plateau after which these women cannot go up. They can be better hospital managers. But you wouldn't have her go up there. She would be chief nurse or chief whatever, and after that end the story. Whereas similarly, if you look at man, there are excellent men who are very good at even the kind of nursing jobs that you'll otherwise not imagine. But men are restricted to it because this is a woman's domain. I don't think. These are the very frightening niche that you create for yourselves, and productivity gets affected because of that. I think we should be open-minded about it.
One final question. Let me get in. Who's going to ask the last question? Why not get is there a male hand up there? No. What is? Sorry. Yeah, please go ahead.
Unless you want to ask.
No, please go ahead.
Do you want to ask a question?
No,
I just wanted to add to what the debate and discussion has been about gender equality and how we need to change the mentality, be it men, be it women, in the country regarding gender equality at work. I think we've been talking more on the peripheries of what women wear, how working hours, etc. I think it goes a little deeper than that, where parenting as such needs to come equally from men as well as women. I think irrespective of how forward-thinking you may be or successful in your career, it's always inevitably a mentality where it's a mother's job to bring up the child irrespective. It's almost, there are a lot of women sitting here who have careers. Me, for one, had to give up practicing law for a few years in the middle because I was on a maternity leave and I took a sabbatical. But I did take a dent for 4 years when I came back to law, and I see my peers way ahead of me, or let's say my husband's career roaring because I took a decision because he wouldn't give up his career or take a back seat while I had to. So it's almost a given that women are going to take a back seat while their careers suffer, and men inevitably have to keep growing because it's a man thing to do. So I think it's gender parity in parenting at base level that needs to come, whereas how we also teach our boys that equality goes deep root and it goes to both the parents.
I agree, but I'm only wanting to remind ourselves that this is not something which has come up nowadays. And I'll take my personal example. It may be applicable, it may not be applicable. My father would do half the kitchen work to help my mother. And there are days when my mother would, and she unfortunately had a lot of high blood pressure problems. My father would tell her to go away, and he would run the kitchen all on his own, help us out, pack our food, send us off to schools, and then he would go wherever he would. So I've never had this whole idea of my mother will have to keep the kitchen going. My father is the breadwinner of the house. My mother was not employed. But then, even then, she was not denied. And this is not just my father. In my father's family, I can tell you my grandfather has done it. I've seen him serve food for grandchildren, if my grandmother wasn't up to it. And when I say when she wasn't up to it, even if she was by mood, no, I wouldn't do it. So be it. I've never seen my grandmother fall sick and make somebody else, my grandfather, do it. There are days when she would say, sorry, I'm not doing it. And my grandfather has done it. And therefore, for me, it's not something which has got to be ingrained into people. It's up to us. After all, the members of the family are our own. And if that's possible in a generation before, and not just one exceptional man, why are we searching for such exceptional men nowadays?
I'm glad my wife is not watching this program. I am delighted. But it is social conditioning, isn't it? There is a social conditioning. I mean, let's be honest. The lady there is absolutely right. How many men will take a back seat to their wife's career? It doesn't happen in India. So, I mean, you come from an exceptional family in that sense. I mean, what will it take to make that exception the rule? What will it take to convince the Indian male that occasionally, if not take the back seat, you can share space with your wife?
Absolutely, absolutely. One, I think there shouldn't be a decrying. That is why I said your day-to-day language. I can say, I mean, if I'm allowed to speak in Tamil, I can tell you, or in Telugu, I can tell you, "Arey, what the hell, this guy does these sort of things at home?" You know, the snide remarks of those men who are caring, those men who venture to say, "No, I'm going to support my wife. I will do this for the house." The kind of remarks these men face, I mean, you discourage them from doing it. And how will you have anybody in your own house doing it for you if you're going to discourage others who are, bold enough to say, I'll do it for my family? That's one thing. And second, such women are also run up. Hey, you're allowing your husband to do it? Hey, what the hell? You're asking your husband to get you water? I remember there are times when my mother used to say, oh my God, I want some water. My father would go get it. And there are some distant relatives who would say, Savitri, what are you up to? She didn't care. In fact, she didn't even bother to change her name after her. She still remained K. Savitri, father's name. So, I mean, it's up to you. You have to stand up to it. And even if there are deriding comments, I think we should be firm. We are not doing anything wrong. But that's the kind of social conditioning which works on even those men who want to help you, those men who are broad enough to accommodate, and those men who probably wouldn't even mind taking maternity leave and paternity leave and be at home. I think it's all for all of us. We have to. And again, today I'm taking a bit of liberty with Rajdeep, if you permit me.
Yeah,
I'm glad my wife is not here. I'm glad Sagarika is not here.
No, that's because I just haven't done enough of work in the kitchen. And you're making me feel terribly guilty about all those years that I never did that work in the kitchen. But ma'am, it's been wonderful having you here. You are a role model in many ways. I mean, your career graph is indicative of what is possible, which is why to have you as a guest of honor tonight to give away the awards is a very special moment. A very big hand, ladies and gentlemen, for Nirmala.
Thank you very much.
You know, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, I have to confess, in all my years of journalism, I've really admired your straight talk and calling a spade and spade. And my husband took a 1 month off and was subjected to a lot of snide remarks. So, yeah, that's another story. But thank you so much, Rajdeep. Thank you so much. I request Mr. Raj Chingappa, Group Editorial Director, to kindly come on stage and present a small token of appreciation